Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and this week I'm going to be sharing with you some of my ideas on how you can copy TV shows when it comes to getting the most value from your content by creating spin-off content. Well, I'm not sure if spin-off is exactly the right word. Maybe the right word is simply complementary content, but let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I'm a big fan of the TV show Walking Dead, and there is a show that plays immediately after each episode, and it's a live show and it's called Talking Dead. And they have celebrity fans, cast members, crew from the series. They're all invited onto Talking Dead, and they talk about what happened in the episode that just aired. And they have the audience getting involved. They engage with people on social media. People call in, they'll do polls and have special behind the scene footage and all sorts of things like that. So Talking Dead is a live after party in a way of each episode of Walking Dead. Now, another example here in the UK, the business reality TV show The Apprentice, and I know The Apprentice is in many countries, not just in the UK, but here straight after they air The Apprentice, they have a show called The Apprentice, You're Fired. And it's a live show again where the fired contestant comes on and gets interviewed, and the celebrities giving their opinions. They get involved with the audience and the public can phone in, things like that as well. Now, I'm not really sure if they do that in other countries with different versions of The Apprentice, but it's a really popular show here in the UK. Other examples, so with Game of Thrones in the US, there was After the Thrones, and in the UK, Thronecast. Again, both after shows where they have special features, the cast, the crew, there's interaction, lots of social media going on. And other examples that I'm not so familiar with, but I know exist. So Love Island has Love Island After Sun. Great British Bake Off has An Extra Slice as well. So I think they're often called companion shows. And there's nothing new or unique to TV either, because if you think about it, with radio in particular and sporting events, there's been reaction shows and after shows and quick discussions after the event since forever. So it's a really popular thing to do. And this got me thinking about how could you do something similar with your content? Because I think it can be great to build a buzz, build a strong community, and just give something more to those really hardcore fans as well. So this concept of creating an after show or a companion show has been something that I've been thinking about, because I think when it comes to repurposing content, it's something that you can do whereby we stick to the really important factors of content repurposing, which is going all in on one particular type of content, one medium, be it your podcast or your video, and making sure that you focus on that first and foremost and create really quality content. And then your repurposed content kind of spins off from that. And in this example, if you create some kind of after show or companion show, it's a little bit like the low-hanging fruit from the content you've already created. So kind of the content tree, and you're picking off the fruit as opposed to something epic and growing a brand new tree, if that makes sense. So here are my 3 ideas to get the creative juices flowing for how you could do something similar with your content. So number 1, firstly, could you host a live show after your podcast or your video goes live, where you have a reflections discussion on what you thought, get ideas from other people and opinions on what they thought, get interactive, maybe run some polls, bring other experts in and ask questions, or bring your audience in and get them asking questions. And perhaps you could do this on your own. Perhaps you could have a co-host. Now, if you did an video interview podcast, podcast. Now, one thing to consider if you've done a guest interview is, could you actually get your guest onto your after show? Now, and not everyone, I think, would want to do this. I know there are pros and cons. You may feel that you've already asked enough of your guests' time just by having them on the video or podcast. So to ask them to come on to another show afterwards may not be, something that you want to do necessarily. And there can be pros and cons, I think, in terms of if you had the person there who was interviewed, the guest, then, a real benefit is you can then allow your audience to ask them questions and you can dig a bit deeper in the things that they said after you've had time to reflect. But then I guess a con is that it may not give your audience the opportunity to be as open and frank about their opinions and what they thought and things like that. So a different discussion could come about if you have people other than your guest involved in the after show. So that's kind of pros and cons. And I know not everybody will have guests on their shows anyway. But it's so easy to do live streaming these days. Pick your platform, any platform, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, if you have live access. And there you go, you have that live platform. And if you made this a regular thing, so consider what would be a good time, what would be a good day and time each week to do this, bearing in mind what your release schedule is for your content, for your podcast or your video show, giving people enough time to consume the content, but also, I guess, making sure that it's something that's close enough to when the content is released, that it's fresh in people's minds, and that you're actually encouraging people to consume your content by a certain time so that they can then fully participate in this after show as well. So I think that is a really big benefit of doing this. So it's something to consider. Now, number 2 is actually building on from this. It's just looking at it from a slightly different angle. And this is where, let's say you have a membership or you have Patreons to your podcast or video show, then you could make this after show, this kind of after party, only available to those people. So to your members or to your Patreons. So with Patreons, that's usually set up where people perhaps pay a couple of dollars a month or a week or whatever you want to set it to be. And by doing that, they are showing, pledging as fans of your show, and you offer to give them a little bit extra. And that's exactly what this could be. And then, of course, if you have membership, if you have a private membership, because that's part of your business model, if this went into the membership, it's another perk of joining the membership. So this, in a way, is looking at the monetization of doing some kind of after show or companion show. Is something to consider. But either way, whether you do it completely free to build a community and a buzz, or do it with patrons or members, again, just make sure that it's something regular on a set day and time every week, and it makes sense in terms of the day and time when you compare it against what your release schedule is of your other content. And then number 3, so moving on from live videos now, a Twitter chat. So an after party, an after show, but it's actually on Twitter, and you run it as a same day, same time every week chat about the content. Now, I spoke about this with Madeline Sklar on episode 59 of the Content 10X podcast. So content10x.com/59. Madeline gave loads of tips there on running Twitter chats, and specifically she did this differently, where the Twitter chat came first and then a Facebook Live came afterwards. So in many ways, what Madeline talks about in that episode is similar to what I'm talking about now, of having a content channel and then some kind of after show reflections type content. Now, she did that immediately afterwards. The chat runs and then the live runs. That was, one option. Other options is to allow a little bit of time for people to consume the content. So that was live followed by live that Madeline did. What I guess I'm trying to promote a bit more here is not necessarily live content followed by live, but your video or your podcast followed later in the week by this after show or this companion content. Lots of things to think about here, really, in terms of what you could do do from a repurposing perspective with your content. The main thing is building that community, building that extra valuable content, but also it's not very labor intensive for you because you have created the original piece of content in the first place. You've put lots of effort into that. And then this is something that should run a little bit more smoothly, and preferably if it's live, then you just do it and then it's done. You don't have to do lots and lots and lots of planning and lots of post-production as well, which I think is one of the big benefits of doing something live after the event. Okay, so I would love to hear what you thought of this episode. I'd love to hear if you are thinking about trying something like this out. And if you do, please do let me know. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Content 10X podcast. I really appreciate it. If you like the show, please do subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. And if you're new to the show, there's plenty more where this came from as well. So be sure to check out the past episodes. If you don't have a copy yet, then be sure to get my book, Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results, which is available in paperback, Kindle and audiobook as well. Head to content10x.com/book or just head over to Amazon or Audible. And follow me on social media as well. I'm at Content 10X on all of the social media platforms, and don't hesitate to get in touch if you're interested in our fully done for you content repurposing service as well, content10x.com. So again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.